Jordan Peterson spoke with Michael Saylor and was left speechless, asking, why doesn't Bitcoin simply absorb all investment capital?
Why would Bitcoin just suck all the investment capital out of everything?
And that wasn't just a question, it's already happening. And this interview with Michael Saylor could have been the moment when millions finally understand why Bitcoin and the Bitcoin price will be catapulted into new regions, will rise. Before we talk about that, we're witnessing a decisive turning point right now. Either something great is about to happen, or things are going to get really uncomfortable. And as is so often the case, the truth probably lies somewhere in between. And the reason for that is simple: the US dollar is in big trouble, and so is the euro. Especially since 2020, the amount of printed money has caused the dollar supply to explode. The markets are practically obsessed with the idea that the central bank of the US, that is the Federal Reserve, will lower interest rates and start printing money again. But that would only make inflation, the rise in prices we've experienced so far, much worse. And recently, the US Central Bank said that it doesn't plan to do that for the time being. And for now, that's a relief. But if at some point they do lower interest rates and start quantitative easing, that is, basically creating money out of thin air, created out of nothing, prices rise much faster and worse. And that hits those hardest who already have little to begin with. And what about the US dollar or the euro? They're already losing more value than the official numbers admit. And speaking of numbers, the inflation figures you keep hearing about aren't real. They are honest. They're sugar-coated information. Inflation is calculated using a basket of goods, with things like food, for example. And if prices only rise slightly, they say inflation is low. But that ignores what really matters. Rising rents, expensive insurance, higher car loans, higher gas or electricity costs. These are the costs that make up everyday life for most people, yet they barely factor into these official numbers. And just as questionable, for example, are the US labor market figures. The number of new jobs is often based on what companies announce. They say they want to hire, but the reality often looks very different. Many companies announce they're creating hundreds of jobs, receive thousands of applications, but then only hire a handful of people. And the insidious part of the whole thing is that your application data, your personal information, is often sold onto other companies. And the labor market figures are based on such announcements and on data about job losses, which also don't always show the whole truth. In short, the situation is shakier than it seems. The dollar and the euro are weakened, inflation is being underestimated, and the labor market numbers are deceptive. And that could lead us into an uncomfortable period. Or if we're lucky, it could offer us a chance to change something, and the truth probably often lies somewhere in between. And in addition, we were able to watch a conversation between Jordan Peterson and Michael Saylor, and what they talked about was highly explosive. They talked about money, about what money actually is, and the whole thing may sound abstract until the system lets someone down. And when that happens, you either go down with the system or you start looking for something incorruptible. And Michael Saylor explained to Jordan Peterson that he didn't discover Bitcoin during good times. He found it when the system turned against him. I had $500 million in cash. Interest rates dropped to zero, and I realized this is no longer money. And Michael Saylor's experience reflects a general truth against. Most people won't discover Bitcoin until they have to. And right now we're seeing the US dollar getting weaker and weaker. Interest rates can't go any lower, and yet more money is being printed, which causes debt to rise. Private and of course also state. And I often watch documentaries about this, and my advice to you is avoid debt. Don't use credit cards or buy on credit. Buy now, pay later offers, not even for groceries. And many people think these aren't debts, but someday they have to pay back large amounts, money they don't have. And such contracts often run for years, and the problem just keeps growing. And growing, it's almost impossible to stop. And worldwide there are trillions of dollars in debt, and a lot of wealth is directly tied to it. The rich often flaunt their wealth, but it's often built on debt. Real estate investors buy houses with borrowed money and hope that tenants will pay them off over decades. And for example, someone might own 10 properties, but also have $180 million in debt. That might keep him up at night. National debt is also rising. And there are ideas to abolish the debt ceiling entirely. In the USA and also in other countries, Brian Armstrong from Coinbase warns that if the US doesn't get its $37 trillion of debt under control, Bitcoin could replace the dollar as the world currency. And a new law in the US could drive the debt up to 50 trillion in 10 years. And in 10 to 15 years, it could be 60 or 70 trillion. And Larry Fink from BlackRock is saying something similar to Brian Armstrong from Coinbase. Without a solution to this, Bitcoin will become the new world currency. And isn't it striking that governments, funds, and companies are now buying Bitcoin on a massive scale? We are witnessing a major transformation. And for Michael Saylor, the year 2020 was a turning point. Not just for the economy, but also in revealing whom the system protects and whom it destroys. And while Main Street was shut down, Wall Street experienced its best year in decades. Amidst this economic turmoil, Michael Saylor began searching for a way to preserve his wealth. Money is susceptible to inflation, real estate prices are rising, and stocks have already doubled. And Michael Saylor said, I set out to see the world was regressing, and I said, Eric, tell me again about this Bitcoin thing.
And I thought, what can you buy? Can I buy real estate? And the answer is real estate was transferred over a few weeks because zero drove the interest rate down to zero. So that's not good. Can I buy a portfolio of stocks? They just hit an all-time high because we drove the interest rate down to zero. That's not good. Can I buy a portfolio of collective art? Oh, yes. Good joy. How am I supposed to find $500 million worth of Picassos and Monets attractively priced? You see a man after 30 years in business and in engineering, education, well-positioned, but not a classically trained economist, not an Austrian economist. I have the question, what is money? I need a liquid fungible asset which will store my economic energy for an indefinite period of time. So what is money? I'm searching for money. And then I arrive at money. And I think to myself, should I buy $500 million worth of money? And my company looks at me and says, 10 and I remember as money, 800 per island in the 70s or 80s. And then for 20 years, it didn't go anywhere. And you should pay attention to that. It's dead money. So I look at us pushing the world back into the Stone Age. It's a devolution. I'm standing by my pool and looking at Eric. And I say, Eric, tell me again about that Bitcoin thing. And Eric was a crypto entrepreneur. And he had invested in digital credits. And I had fired him 2 years earlier in 2018. And I thought, that's probably just a scam coin that's going to get hurt. But everyone realizes that when I say you have 6 months to live, then you look for a rescue. And if I tell you that every asset you hold in Canada will be taken from you in 6 months, that could happen. And think about how you would get your money out of Canada. Yes, we've already thought about that. And the point is, you haven't thought it through for 20 years, out into priority. And then when you're faced with a crisis, a challenge, you start thinking. So I said, Eric, tell me about that Bitcoin thing again. No. This question led to a revelation. I realized as Michael Saylor that I need a liquid, fungible, incorruptible store of value. One that can preserve economic energy over time. And that ruled out everything except Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, Michael Saylor explained, is more than just software. It is a decentralized, fault-tolerant, nuclear-hardened organism led by no one, defended by everyone, built not to maximize yield, but to minimize corruption. It's not about hoarding wealth. It's about protecting the fruits of your labor over time with as little parasitism as possible. And that's not greed, that's justice. We should also say it's not exactly that they want to keep their money. They want to keep the fruits of their labor and their reputation. And they want that for as long as possible, with the least amount of parasitism and corruption, manageable. And because when you say you want to keep yours, and then evil, capitalist ring to it. If you spent your entire lifetime building up a presence, and you did that in a way that also brought freedom to other people, it's only natural. Jordan, of the sort that keeps hardworking people working and everything abundant in order to not allow. Peterson asked the crucial question, if it grows exponentially, why doesn't Bitcoin just suck the capital out of everything? And Michael Saylor answers, it will. That's why I am in terms of its success. And let's say it's exponential, because maybe here, why won't Bitcoin just suck the investment capital out of everything? That's why I'm here. Those are the consequences of that. It's just insane what has been said here. And if we look around, we realize it's serious. The US dollar is facing its end, and so is the euro. The value of the dollar is falling. Debts and deficits are skyrocketing. Many companies are desperate to buy and hoard Bitcoin because the dollar is unstable. The super rich own almost all the Bitcoins, 95% belong to them. The future? It's not going to be a walk in the park. Only those with wealth, with assets will make it through. The rich are buying up everything, land, houses, and now Bitcoin too. Top CEOs are warning the dollar is finished. Bet on Bitcoin. Some even say that Bitcoin could be worth millions, maybe even 2 or 7 million or even more. Think about that. Do you need more wealth for the future? Debt keeps rising. It's not getting any better. That's why it's so important that you take action now, that you start looking into Bitcoin now, and that you start learning about the financial system now. I hope you had fun and have a great day. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to build Bitcoin and crypto financial independence for yourself, click the link in the description below the video. Watch the video.